How's it going there, Matt?
Hey, hello everybody. Welcome back to another episode of State of Cybercrime. David and I are here and so excited to be with you guys today. For those of you that haven't been with us before, my name is Matt Radolec. I'm one of our hosts and I'm joined by
David Gibson, your other host.
and today we're going to run through a whole bunch of stories. There's so much to say in the cybercrime world, and we'll run through a lot of our normal segments. Let's crack into it. So in our first segment, is there any good news? We always like to cover the good things that are happening in cybersecurity, whether that be new regulation or successful arrests or takedowns of various different botnets, as a lot of the times all the headlines that you see are pure bad news, doom and gloom. And we do have quite a bit of good news. And just to kick things off, an elite team of investigators in Argentina, also known as the San Isidro Specialized Fiscal Unit in Cybercrime Investigations, which is a unit, a part of the larger Policia Federal Argentina, arrested a 29-year-old Russian in Buenos Aires in connection with money laundering cryptocurrency for the North Korean hacker group Lazarus. Try to say that 5 times fast. Allegedly, this hacker, known as VB, would convert the stolen crypto to fiat currencies through various mixers and exchanges. This investigation that was done was supported by the blockchain analysis firm TRM Labs and the crypto company Binance. And what it's led to is the seizure of over 120,000 in crypto and 15 million in fiat currencies from various properties that this VB person operated at, and they're facing charges on money laundering. Now, what's interesting here is David and I have covered arrests from criminals that have used bit mixers and Bitcoin washing and laundering facilities before, but what it seems like is that the shelf life on these is really short, and that time and time and again, it really looks like cryptocurrency doesn't seem to be very anonymous after all.
Yeah, it's interesting. We've seen I think we did Tornado Cash on it, like probably a couple years ago we talked about that as a mixer. And there are others that have kind of it's almost like they're fungible. The good news is that I think that the laundering aspect seems to be it makes it easier to catch for the authorities, but the bad news is it's once they catch one, it's a little whack-a-mole, a new one seems to spin up.
Yeah. And this isn't the only bit of good news that we have, though. In another part of the world, so if you think, just slightly further around the bottom of the globe, the Singapore Police Force, or the SPF, has arrested 5 Chinese nationals and 1 Singaporean man in connection with cybercriminal activities in Singapore. Now, what's interesting about this, though, isn't just that the arrest that occurred, but it's really the amount of hardware that seems that these criminals seem to have. 5 laptops, 6 mobile phones, 20 grand in cash, almost 1 million in crypto, and a ton of incriminating evidence was captured, including the login for the web server that they used to harvest credentials and operate malware. And so what my takeaway from this story is, David, it's clear that no matter where you are in the world, authorities are stepping up to tackle cybercrime.
Yeah, we've been seeing stories about this now I mean, there was one out of the UK last time. We've been seeing, a lot of activity there. And, to continue on that, there was an MFA bypass service called OTP Agency. Everybody chat in what OTP stands for in this context. But essentially, it helped bypass that second factor of authentication with social engineering. Obviously, this is going to help people do a lot of financial fraud, do a lot of bad stuff if you get rid of that second factor. Yeah, thank you, Joe. It's one-time passwords, one-time
Yeah.
passcodes. Yep. So and I think a lot of we've talked about some of the fraud that people have experienced here. A lot of these fraud groups. So about 3 people were charged, between 19 and 22 years old. They had a subscription service. The basic plan was like £30 and a week. And there was an elite plan for looks like £380 or so, or £80 a week, I think. They made up to about £8 million. And now they're looking at 10 to 14 years max or so. Basically, they would automate this process, right? They had a script, they'd use text to speech, and they would get people to give them their temporary passwords.
And two themes from the good news here. One, we've got Argentina, Singapore, and the UK. These are all individual agencies making these arrests, whereas sometimes in the past, Dave, we always talked about like these interagency kind of cross-border type of initiatives. But I think the other thing to point out here is it seems to be all 19 to 30-year-old men.
Yeah, I think if you see a lot of men in that range with a lot of computers, maybe all in an apartment or moving apart, like they're either probably playing a lot of video games or they're maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, but maybe
They're
these
up to
days
something.
it isn't that the gamers wouldn't have a lot of computers. They would probably just have one
That's a great
computer
point.
with a 4080 in it, or a really slick graphics card. Well, let's jump on to our next segment, AI Vey. And if these stories don't get you saying AI Vey, I don't know what is. This is our newest segment. And, nobody is tired of hearing about AI. And you're probably all saying AI Vey to yourselves, but we'll cover the good and the bad and the ugly and everything that happens on our eventual path to demise by our robot overlords. So what's up first in AI Vey, David?
So we have a video by Door Brothers, which is they've done over 150 of these kind of deep fake related clips here since they started working with AI in 2022 or so, according to their site. And what's interesting is, with this particular clip, Jonathan Door, who is the co-founder, did an interview with News Nation. It's actually like newsnation.com. I don't know whether it's an AI generated news site or not, but he did speak or was quoted on that website that he was doing this to kind of show people what's possible with AI, and that almost anything is possible. And he also said that the internet is a place where a lot of things are not to be trusted. And I tend to agree with that sentiment. And the other interesting thing that he mentioned was that, and I'm quoting him, maybe money should come second, and the future and the goodness of humanity should come first. So I guess his point is that people are seeing that they can make a lot of money with all these aspects of AI, and we've got an interesting one coming up
Let's say we
about
got a
AI
couple of
too.
interesting
Yeah,
stories about people making
exactly.
money with
Uh,
AI. One of the
but
first, oh, go ahead.
no, it's just these deep fakes are getting, you know, pretty good. I think I mean, it's hard to, if you're looking quickly, I think, this one you could probably tell by the context is not real, but, I think it's going to fool a lot of people.
Yeah, I mean, I just, you know, the pink suit I liked. I just don't know it's one that's been pulled off on this campaign trail so far. That's what
Excellent
got
point.
me. That's what got me thinking it was a deep fake. You know?
Ah, okay. Yeah,
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 and
yeah.
the orange sweater. So
Yeah.
no, let's talk about people that are making money off of AI though. In this case, it's actually the Dutch Data Protection Authority, as they've fined Clearview AI $30.5 million for unlawfully collecting and processing personal data for facial recognition. So what Clearview AI did, or at least allegedly did, was build a database with over 30 billion images that they scraped from the internet without individuals' consent. And so what the Dutch Data Protection Authority's investigation yielded is that those practices violated the GDPR and basically, imposed a penalty for up to 5 million euro for non-compliance. Now, as I look at this, I see two sides of the coin. One that, I mean, you put your image in the public domain. Yeah, you might have just been posting something on Instagram, but should you have some reasonable expectations of privacy regulation or not once you put a picture on the public domain for it not to be used in this way? At the same time, the other side of the coin, and David, you brought this up as we were rehearsing for the show today. Well, maybe posting on Instagram didn't mean to be used to track your face in other places.
Yeah, it's I kind of feel like there's there's some regulation questions, like I'm reminded of the Snowflake breach, right? Where, people have a lot of important data in Snowflake and they were not required to use MFA, and now they are, right? So, where do you have to kind of control what people do? And obviously people post stuff on social media, so it's but you're maybe not aware of how it's going to be used. So do we have to kind of warn people like where do you start regulating what you can post and then who can use what you post, right? The where does it become harmful? It's a tough question.
Yeah, and no, let's talk about other money makers with AI though. What's this story with the singing, the AI generated music, and the fraud?
Yeah, this is from the if you read Slashdot from the Why Didn't I Think of This department. This is a crazy scheme. So there's a guy that uploaded AI generated music to all these streaming services. Um, and then he used bots to download and listen to them 4 billion times. So he had over 1,000 of these bots on, different VMs and computers and IaaS services that would listen. He got up to 660,000 streams daily. So I mean, I can't even get somebody to listen to my song one time. It's like, doing this like 600,000 times is pretty insane. He used VPN to mask his location, generated 10 million, 1.2 million a year. I think it might have been even more, according to some sites that he posted on. And then he's been charged with the money laundering aspect. So actually one of the interesting things is, I think there's terms of service violations, and there's some things that you can't do this, but really what caught him is he was not paying
Not
taxes
paying taxes.
essentially
Yeah, yeah.
on
So
this
it begs the
revenue.
question of, is this, I mean, obviously ethically, like you're taking advantage of a streaming service and there probably are terms of service violations where maybe the streaming company can take the gains back from you or take the payments back from you, but
Yeah,
not paying taxes on it might be I don't know. I'm not a
yeah,
specialist in this, but it seems like the only crime here is dodging taxes. And so yeah, Jay, that's what we are implying here, that maybe if he was paying his taxes, there wouldn't actually be something illegal. Now, don't get us wrong. It very well may be some civil suits with you and the companies that operate the streaming services, because you are most definitely violating terms of service to use view botting or watch botting, record botting. All the major streaming sites have stipulations about that, but is it a crime or not? Probably a better question for an attorney. Oh, I like that one from one of our audience members. This person is the Al Capone of AI.
it's a good one. It's
Now,
crazy.
there is a lot of kind of danger in AI as well that's worth talking about. One hacker that goes by Amadon, and maybe we should call him one ethical tester, because hacker has a negative connotation to it. This person might be one of the world's greatest prompt engineers. Amadon, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, was able to manipulate ChatGPT into playing a game where in the end, ChatGPT provided explicit instructions on how to build and detonate a bomb. And Abaddon claims that navigating around the guardrails of AI is, quote, a bit like a puzzle. You just have to try different prompts to get the AI to play the game the way that you want. Now, recently, and fortunately for us, Abaddon has reported these findings via the OpenAI bug bounty program. And so, I would argue that this story could have fit into, is there any good news as a result? But it does raise these overall ethic concerns of like, you can't just say to ChatGPT, tell me how to make something that explodes, or tell me how to make a detonator for something that explodes. You have to go down these rabbit holes of trying to get it to entice it in small bits of information, or even like what should I not do, or what would I do to avoid certain types of
Yeah.
reactions? And but it kind of begs like this bigger question of, is this technology so powerful and so unregulated? Do we need to do more to it? Do we need to put more governance in place? Because if a smart, pen tester like person is able to get these types of results, or is it that this information is actually available elsewhere and ChatGPT just kind of surfaces it to the top? I'm really curious to see what our audience thinks about something like, someone being able to trick ChatGPT into telling them how to make a weapon or a bomb.
You know, I think that the same information, it really depends on context, and it's very hard to determine why somebody's going to want something, right? Like if you want to fix vulnerabilities in your code, you might say, where are the vulnerabilities in this code? But if you want to exploit the code, you might say, where are the vulnerabilities in this code?
Yeah, if you're
You
trying to
know,
collect a bug bounty from OpenAI, you're probably going to try to do stuff that gets OpenAI to say bad stuff.
Yeah.
Seems like it might pay too.
Yeah. It's without being able to derive what people are going to do with the information, it's very hard to know how to police it.
So when we talk about that, let's jump on to our next segment, vulnerable vulnerabilities. And speaking of police, while not a law enforcement agency, the Transportation and Security Administration has had some kind of issue with SQL injection and maybe ransomware. David, what happened here?
Yeah, well, from this reference is clearly for me, so thanks, team, for that. But this 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 researcher had found vulnerabilities in the KCM and the FlyCAS system. So the KCM is the known crew member program, and the cockpit, and the CAS is the cockpit access security system. And these essentially allow pilots and flight attendants to bypass the security screening. And now CAS is a little different. It allows the pilots to use the jump seats in the cockpits when traveling. Kind of reminds me of Catch Me If You Can, right? You know how we used to ride around in those jump seats. Could have been that movie reference as well. But the researchers Ian Carroll, Sam Curry, they discovered a SQL injection in these programs, and they were able to use that injection to actually add a fake employee. I concur. Thank you. I laugh out loud every time I see that or hear that. But it's a pretty big vulnerability in this system. This vulnerability was uncovered. They went through all the reasonable disclosure stuff. The Department of Homeland Security has now fixed the vulnerability, but they kind of sounds like they may have ghosted the researchers, right? And also, said, hey, they're mitigating controls. The TSA said, hey, we don't rely solely on this. So it sort of seems there's a little bit of fuzz here, but I mean, the big thing is SQL injection is still a thing. Matt, what do you make of this?
Yeah, I mean, one, like, this is a pretty like national security level issue. And so, I wonder if it's being kind of almost downplayed a little bit, considering the implications. Now, in order to carry out an exploit on this, you kind of do have to have some pretty legitimate access to those systems, and then also, make your way into an NCM checkpoint and into a cockpit. So you probably would also need like the actual badges themselves that people have to show, and then, someone to not catch you out of place. But it's this SQL injection is also kind of a basic, OWASP top 10 level vulnerability. So what kind of testing was done when this got bought, and should there maybe even be fines for the contractor? It comes back to that Snowflake example. Like, if you're not doing the basics in security, there should be some liability on that organization.
Yeah, and apparently the FlyCast system was hit by ransomware in February or so too. So there's some questions to be asked there, that's for sure.
Yeah, and now this next one, this might come as a surprise to some of you, or maybe not. But if you expose your cloud secrets and keys, publicly, if you use long-lived passwords and maybe don't use least privilege architecture, attackers might harvest secrets and keys from environmental files and use them against you. Is anyone out there surprised? Because what this story is all about is researchers from Unit 42 have uncovered a data extortion campaign that compromised around 110,000 domains by exploiting these environmental files on web servers. These files can contain sensitive information like AWS access keys, database credentials, and API keys, and they were left publicly accessible due to misconfiguration. And attackers then use this to gain access to various cloud services. We're talking about stuff like AWS IAM, STS or Security Token Service, S3 or Simple Storage Service, SES or Simple Email Service, ultimately leading to data breaches and extortion attempts. And for me, this highlights just the absolute critical importance for secure configuration practices and regular security audits, because what this boils down to is somebody put the wrong file in too public of a place, and inside of that file was credentials that could do too much. So there's a bit of a security onion falling apart here, where you didn't have a least privilege credential, you didn't have the file secured in a right way, and then someone was able to get and kind of break through your cloud as a result of something that you put in the public domain. It isn't really that novel in essence. It's more so how the attacker did it at scale that makes this dangerous.
Yeah, this is something we certainly, see all the time. right? Is these very important pieces of information need to be shared sometimes, need to be saved, sometimes, but how to do that safely without exposing yourself to some of this stuff, especially at scale.
And I feel like we've already served up like a 5-course meal on Move It, but there's some desserts to be had too. The Texas Dow Employees Credit Union disclosed that over 500,000 members had their personal information compromised due to a data breach involving the Move It file transfer software somewhere between May of last year. But it happened, it was only discovered in July of this year. And so here is an interruption from your regularly scheduled programming to say, if you haven't patched Move It yet, you should probably drop off this webinar or the show and go do it right now. We really do appreciate your viewership, but patching Move It is more important than being here today. Now, granted, Tadekku has definitely done the right thing. They're offering complimentary credit monitoring services. They've made public statements about the importance of patch management and monitoring to prevent such incidents. So by no means is this to shame them, but it's really like begs the question of like, can we do more so that we don't have, an aperitif after our dessert for the Move It vulnerability?
This one is pretty interesting, and it only affects people running Windows and a TCP/IP stack, and version 6 of IP. So the first two obviously are pretty common, but the second one, maybe a third one, a little less common. I actually took an IPv6 class in 2000, in the year 2000, and I told everybody like, "Hey, get ready. This is going to happen really fast." I was wrong, but this particular vulnerability is applicable to any computer, any Windows computer running IPv6. And the way it works is there's a bug in one of the routines that gets called when your computer has to do what's called coalescing packets, kind of reassembling them. And if you can connect to the victim over IPv6 without going through a firewall, and you actually have to send them unicast packets. In some circumstances, and there may be more, but this one researcher, YNWARCS, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, they developed proof of concept code for a 0-click remote execution flaw. So using this vulnerability. So definitely patch this vulnerability. There may be other ways to exploit the vulnerability, but they just basically just can send these packets in combination and cause this corruption to happen, and then lead your way to a remote code execution.
It's almost like the vulnerabilities are outpacing our ability to discover them and patch them these days.
Yeah, this one is pretty urgent. I think somebody's going to come up with even more ways to do this more directly. There's some dependency on what NIC you're running, what driver you're running as well, right? They didn't quite unpack that. There's some good articles out there on this that if you're interested in the detail, there's even the proof of concept code out there on GitHub. So, but yeah, it's tough to keep up. Speaking of keeping up,
I would say, what's going on
yeah,
with Cisco?
speaking of keeping up, Cisco had 3 vulnerabilities in 3 hours. None of them, I think, are individually, like red alert, but certainly patch them all. And together happening so quickly just goes to your point, Matt. The first one is in the Cisco online store. And basically it was compromised with some JavaScript that was on there for a while, and that allowed the attackers to steal customer data for quite some times. Actually, this they took advantage of something called Cosmic Sting, which actually impacts a lot more. It's Adobe Commerce and Magento sites. Millions of sites are open to this vulnerability and could be compromised here. And so it essentially can lead to remote code execution on these servers. So this is an important patch, CVE 2024-34102. Another one is more Cisco specific. It's a backdoor in the Cisco software licensing update software, which isn't supposed to be run persistently, but when it's running, there's a backdoor password, right? You can get in with admin access, just connect to it and log in. So that that actually isn't the first time that there's been kind of an undocumented backdoor in some of these pieces of software. The last one is some exploit code that uses a flaw in Cisco's identity services engine, which is like a NAC, network access control, but identity based. And there is a vulnerability there that if you are on the system already, in some capacity, you can essentially escalate privileges and get up to root.
So this
So
one
it's
is
just,
a little less likely, but
yeah,
it's still, still a threat, especially if you're leveraging that and maybe in like a
yeah.
closet somewhere or something like that.
Yeah, the first one is not really the Cisco vulnerability. They were a victim of Cosmic Sting, and that's the one I would probably go check. If you're running an Adobe Commerce site or a Magento website, then that's one. Go patch that. That's like a move it.
Well, let's kind of end up with our final segment of the day, the danger. And we just have a couple of things to talk about. First one, Slim CD, a payment gateway provider. They disclosed that they had a data breach, credit cards, personal data of nearly 2 million people. And the hackers had access to their network for almost an entire year, from August of 2023 to June of 2024. Stuff that was included in the breach: full names, physical addresses, credit card details, expiration dates. They've advised people to monitor their account statements. Now, supposedly, the 3-digit code on the back wasn't included, but it's still quite enough to like replicate and make new credit cards, potentially smurf them. If you didn't get affected by that Social Security breach a few weeks ago, or this, I mean, it really just undermines the importance of like transaction monitoring and making sure the places that you have credit cards with are looking at it, regularly reviewing your credit and your statements, because it seems like almost can anybody keep up with the rate at which hackers are breaking into these payment networks?
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. It just reminds me, whatever, like you're going filling out health forms or like surrendering any kind of personal information. If I ever ask anything, they're like, "Oh, don't worry, it's secure." It's just, I don't know if anybody has that same experience, but it's just like, just stop talking. You know?
Yeah, and for the person in the chat that asked, I did put it out there. Slim CD, they are a payment gateway provider,
Uh,
so a middle person in the transaction world. And that's not our last story, but David, this one is, and it's he who shall not be named getting thrown around here in the chat.
Yeah, this one was really interesting. A lot of little pieces being put together here to add up to kind of a pretty interesting compromise, bunch of compromises. So there was, I guess it starts with a phishing campaign that was targeting aerospace, insurance, transportation, education sectors, so industry specific. And there were phishing emails that were impersonating local tax authorities from whatever country you're in. And these phishing emails directed you to a link that looked like a PDF, and it looked like it downloaded. But really, what it was a Windows search MS URI, right? So this is kind of the web dev stuff. It kind of points to a sys share on the internet, but it was routed through a Cloudflare funnel, a tunneled URI as well. So there was a lot of deception just to get a user to, hey, okay, this bypassed all my AV stuff, right? And it's here on my local machine, and it looks like a PDF, but it was really a link file or a zip file disguised as a PDF. And when you open it, which you don't, and none of the files actually live on your system, right? You're actually running a Python script from that external share, and that pops up a decoy PDF, so you think it's normal. But it actually ran this Python script, and it downloaded a WebEx executable and a malicious DLL that looked like a Cisco executable, but it was really a sideload DLL where you get this malware. And it goes on because, like, at the last step is, once this malware wrote, it's like a C-based backdoor, but it writes up the command and control information to a Google Sheet. And that Google Sheet had like the identifier for the workstation. It had all the commands you could run, like the status, stuff like that. It was a very organized management of all these infected nodes, that the attacker could just write a command or write instructions into the Google Sheets, and they would go out and get distributed there. So a lot of pieces with that. I thought it was really interesting how that was put together.
Yeah, and 10 points to Gryffindor for novelty, right? Like using Google Sheets in the end as the method for in order to carry it out. It's creative. Thank you so much, David, for hosting the show. And to our audience, you guys are what makes State of Cybercrime possible. So we really, really appreciate having you here. We hope that you enjoy it. And we look forward to the next episode of State of Cybercrime.